Boop boop ba ba boop boop ba ba boop boop ba ba escaping dystopia. Boop boop ba ba escaping dystopia. There once was a show that no one was watching, and so I would sing like no one was watching. Hello, everybody. I'm going to edit this. Boop, 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 boop. Hey, darling. Alrighty. We shall be done with that. And we will close that. What? A new song? Man. I'll do what I can. I'll see if I can get a new song. That one was just so inspired. I spent so many seconds spilled. I spent so many seconds thinking of that I'm pretty sure I improvised it in the moment that first time, and then just stuck with it because it was so cool. All right, it's been a couple weeks. We should probably discuss that. I was on vacation. End of discussion. So, now that I'm back, it was a good vacation. It was nice. Nice to get out. We went to see some wonderful landmarks. Continue to change Arches National Park. And also, my niece got married, which was fun. It's always good to see the fam. And folks, while we were gone, some things happened, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. A couple weeks worth of some stuff. Try to go back and look at some of the bigger things that I posted about in the last couple weeks. So, subjects that we will cover this evening. A little bit on the new Republican Health Care Act. It's so much stuff to talk about, so many different angles that they did here that are just horrible. So we'll talk about a few of those. Trump, Ford, China, and NAFTA. I've got a fun little story about that to tell you. A little bit about the Ossoff election reaction down in the South, where Republican won. And the possibility of robot replacement by profession. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight. That's actually going to start accelerating, I think, a little bit faster now. And we'll talk about that, too. There's an old phrase that used to be in politics. It was called, never get in an argument with someone who buys ink by the barrel. We're going to talk a little bit about that discussion and the history of it, and whether or not it's true anymore. A slight discussion on what I'm starting to call Bothsidism, which as we go through this healthcare bill, it's going to be bad. This is one of those things that shows up all the time. It's particularly... the folks who like it a lot are... There was a great article I ran into a long time ago, and they're the politophobes, is what I call them, and what they're called in that article. And they're big believers in Bothsidism. Anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the FBI nomination that wasn't. I don't know if there has been an FBI nomination or not. We'll talk about that. Talk about some crops rotting. Talk about some Russian cyber attacks and our response. And then, of course, that Second Amendment solution shooting that happened a little while ago. It looks like there's not going to be any fatalities other than the unfortunate gentleman who believed that was a good way to go about changing things. He was killed during the shooting. No one else died. Looks like Scalise is going to be released and fine. And with that, we shall begin. We're only a few minutes in, so thanks everybody who's wandered by. And anybody who watches later, I appreciate the continued viewing. It looks like a couple people watch every now and again, so I'm doing this, having fun with it, so keep doing it for as long as I think it's worthwhile. Should probably be a little bit, but anyway, I need to do a little bit more on the escaping dystopia media empire stuff, which is a joke, of course. We do have a website, and we do have a publicist. We've got a whole PR team in New York that works on stuff. We have a website. So anyway, while I was gone, so we're going to start here. The new Republican Health Care Act. This is exactly what I thought was going to happen with the Republicans. They went and back and basically came up with a health care plan that is a tax cut. And that's it. They're switching Medicaid from a needs-based system to a block grant system and have a big tax cut and change the way that they're trying to help people pay for insurance. They did what I thought they were going to do, which was cut taxes immediately and then only have the other stuff kick in a few years down the road past the next election cycles. I think I'll have to look at specifically what's in it, but I believe the first cutoff stuff was after the 2018 cycle, and then it wasn't until 2020 that they really start cutting off Medicaid stuff, and then people will realize, oh, that's what they were talking about when they cut that off. So there's a lot of folks who don't understand that the Obamacare, one of the big expansions under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, that's the Obamacare thing, was through the states expanding their Medicaid rolls. And the deal was the feds would pick up the bulk of that cost for a number of years, and then, or actually they would pick up all of that cost for a number of years to get things kind of jump-started, and then continue to pick up, I believe it was like 90% of the cost for ongoing that was paid for by these taxes that they're getting rid of. So when the Republicans change Medicaid from a system where it's this needs-based system where people who need the help can get the help and anybody who needs it gets it, they change it to a block grant system. So instead it has a specific budget, and once that money is spent or not spent, that's it. So the issue with this, and a lot of the problem, the safety net in the United States is built on this notion that it'll be there when people need it, and not, and that's how they're designed. It's designed as needs-based systems. So when we have a whole bunch of people who need Medicaid and Medicare, it costs more. They're not set up as just a specific spend this amount of money and then stop. It's here's what we're going to do, which is going to care for everybody who's like this, who needs this help, and then the cost of it we'll figure out. And so when there's a lot more need, the cost goes up, right? When you have a major recession and then you have this economy that only benefits a smaller group of people, and there's a lot more need, and that some of the cases that need becomes constant, you have a bigger issue. Now when they do this block grant switch, what they're going to do is make it so, you have this many people, so you get this many people times this much money, depending on, a few other factors. I'll have to look exactly how it works out, but, they like to keep it simple like that. The problem with that then just throws up some weird disparities between rich states and poor states, and I don't think the poor states quite realize what's going to happen to them under this bill yet, so... But anyway, I think there's a good chance it's going to pass, because that's what I think they were keeping silent about and doing the negotiations and the buy-offs behind the scenes to get those 50 or 51 votes in the Senate. So I do think it's going to pass. I think they're going to vote on it this next week, right before 4th of July, and then I'll leave. And that's why I think that McConnell was playing it like this. And then they're going to just wait and see how the fallout goes. I think they can get away with it. I don't know. This is going to be really painful. And Bill Moyers had a quote, and this is from one of those, Kellyanne, I guess, is her name. But this is Bill Moyers writes, anyone else extremely frustrated by this? This is from the Huffington Post. On Sunday, White House counselor Kellyanne Conway on Sunday came right out and said what so many Republicans are probably thinking, that taking Medicaid away from able-bodied adults is no big deal because they can go out and find jobs that provide health insurance. apparently nobody has told Conway that the majority of able-bodied adults on Medicaid already have jobs. The problem is that they work as parking lot attendants and childcare workers, manicurists and dishwashers. In other words, low-paying jobs that typically don't offer insurance, take away their Medicaid, and they won't be covered. There's a lot of people who are in this role, and there's a lot of this working poor, especially with larger families, that get covered by Medicaid, and the block grants are going to really, really hurt a lot of those people because there won't be the resources available for them to get their basic health treatment. And again, the idea between having more people covered is that when you have health insurance and can use it, when you have a small problem, you can treat it before it becomes a big problem, and it just becomes more efficient. Our society becomes healthier, happier, all the way around. And we're talking about like one in 10 people in the country losing health insurance. And it is block grants, first come, first come, first serve. That's exactly how it comes, and it becomes one of those things where if you want to get, like I posted about this, if you plan on getting cancer, get it now. But I mean, it might be a thing where you have to start to game that point of, well, I don't have any money, but I need to get this operation, so I'm going to try and work through Medicaid to try and get paid. So let's try and do it at the beginning of the fiscal year, right? While there's still some money to do this. Because that's exactly the thing. When you talk to the block grant, I mean, that's it. You just have this much money to spend, and that's it. That's what they're talking about moving to. Not saying, well, we have this many people that qualify, so what do they need? Oh, well, they have this many served. Well, they did this, they put in this many claims, so how much did it cost? Well, that's what you find out later. It's no, you have this much money, so again, all of these other things run up against those hard walls. It changes the program immensely. Republicans have hated Medicaid since it existed, and this is how they're trying to kill it. And this is real. And I do think it's going to pass this week, because I don't think that we can stop it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of that, why, but this will all tie together here later. It's all one big story here. Moving on from that horrific, nasty, I mean, it's essentially the House bill, but a little bit nastier, right? So I saw a couple stories about Trump, Ford, China, and NAFTA. Apparently, there was a plant that Ford had thought they were talking about moving to Mexico, and Trump, blah, 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 did his blah, 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 and his blah, blah, took credit for them not moving it to Mexico, and he probably still is taking credit for them not moving it to Mexico. However, when they look at the global business climate and look at the U.S., and now they've also, again, the Trump administration put in the notice to formally renegotiate NAFTA, so there's a lot of uncertainty here in the U.S. market about what's going to happen. This is what a lot of people are talking about more. In businesses, one of the things that they hate generally is risk and uncertainty, and you generally need to buy insurance. It costs money for risk and uncertainty. Those are factors that make the cost of doing business increase. So by renegotiating NAFTA, Trump did stop Ford and dropping out of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, where the U.S. was negotiating with a number of countries around the Pacific Rim to have standardized trade practices and labor rules in some ways to resolve disputes. So we dropped out of that, and now we're renegotiating this other thing, again, throwing up a lot of uncertainty. So Ford is not building that plant in Mexico. They're going to build it in China, where they can build it in China, and then China will have negotiated their regional trade deals, so allow easy export. So again, from the business standpoint, Ford realizes quite quickly that, in order to take advantage of this market and continue growing as a growing concern as a company, that they have to do that. Now, what you're also going to see, of course, is that there's going to be some floored fracas that shows up in about 5 years that's half the price and a third of the quality. Because, again, once you're on the Chinese networks, they know everything that's going on. So there you go. Ford not moving to Mexico, Ford moving to China. Focus production moving there, and they'll re-import them there. So, moving on. There was an election that a lot of people got really excited about down in Georgia. Ossoff versus this other guy. I wanted to... Oh, that was another thing I was going to look at. The Ossoff guy, he lost. He was a Democrat. I don't think a Democrat has won that district. Maybe in my lifetime once, when I was a wee little baby. But it's been 40 years or so, so people were thinking how far the anti-Trump thing would go, and it looks like it's pushing about 10 points, but that wasn't enough. As I noted the other day, he got 48% of the vote when they had a big runoff. There was one Democrat and a whole huge field of Republicans all tearing each other apart. And he got 48% of the vote, and then he ran against one Republican and ran as a moderate, didn't run against Trump. His opponent, actually, I think she was one, this is what I was going to do, I think she did she was the one who ran the Komen problem. Wasn't she the one? Yeah, she was the one who had to resign from the Komen breast cancer thing because she was pushing it too far, the politics, right? She's like a Tea Party Republican. And this guy didn't go after her anyway. He lost, so she's in Congress now. If you remember that. Karen Handel, a former Republican candidate for governor, she has run for like 90 different offices in Georgia, who resigned from the Susan G. Komen for the Cure Foundation last year, resigned Tuesday as senior vice president for policy, just days after the foundation reversed its policy to largely end for financial support for breast cancer screenings at Planned Parenthood amid an uproar. She wanted to stop their Planned Parenthood support from Komen for breast cancer screening because she's a conservative and they have a completely intellectually bankrupt ideology. Sorry. And so, anyway, she's in Congress now. So earlier I was talking a little bit about, and this is one of the things, this is one of the big recurring topic that we're going to talk about here on Escaping Dystopia. Because the idea is looking at this society that's going to exist 20 years from now. And what do we want to create? How do we want it to work? And what do we want it to look like? I posted this earlier today, and it's this nice chart about what likelihood your job is going to be replaced by robots and how soon. There's a lot of them that are going to be replaced by robots and fairly soon. This is a problem. A big one, generally, for our society, and it's one that we're not really addressing much at all. Had the other person won this last election, she put together a team, study it, come back hardcore in about a year with some outstanding ideas. But the way it works now, we got, oh, shoot. I need a whole list of names I can just call the guy when I need to reference him. What was it? Lord Dampnuts. Yeah, that was great. I thought that was pretty fun. But Lord Dampnuts doesn't really get this notion that people need, that we're going to have this really vastly changing society. That technology and automation are going to destroy a lot of jobs, and they are. But anyway, this chart has a lot of fun ones. A lot of the big red stuff is the stuff I was talking about earlier. Those same kind of low-paying jobs, dishwashers, childcare, not necessarily childcare, parking lot. Every place you see some sort of automated machine starting to take over, the next generation of those is going to be wildly better. We're looking at, and this is not a joke, really, a future where even for produce or any like retail store, you're not necessarily going to need and this is even from after something's been produced by a robot, right? We will have robots that will be able to drive it to the store, that will be able to stock the shelf. You'll go in and browse, that warehouse, and you will check out through an automated checkout machine with the robot, either, with your RFID or just scanning the barcode. And, you might have a few people here and there, but all of this and kind of a lot of the stores and the businesses of the future will be this fully automated stem-to-stern situation. And that's the future that we're looking at. So what part of my goal here in talking about this stuff, and that's why I'm going to, keep talking even if only a few people watch every week or so, is avoiding that kind of thing. And when, like, in speaking of this, and there was another, this is one of those things, again, you had Lord Dampnuts talked about this carrier plant, right, where they give these big tax cuts in Indiana. This was Pence's money thrown around. Now they're also doing layoffs that were allegedly stopped by money being given to them. But that money is also being used to help automate a lot of the factory because, again, from a business standpoint, there's no reason once you have the capital to automate a system, there's no reason not to. And you will lose to competitors that do so and do the investment and do it effectively. This level of computerized work is going to continue to eat up the food chain as you go further and further. And we'll talk about this more. Sad face, robots are taking over. They are taking over the jobs, and we could hopefully work towards a really wonderful society. It would really be actually kind of nice when you have that happen, but the fruits of those labors need to be a little bit more, So, speaking of this, one of the issues why this isn't happening so much, so there was a phrase, and it actually turns out it's only been around since about the 60s, the mid-60s, and the idea was, and I remember this from my comm classes and, some political science, you've probably heard this, but the phrase is never get in a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel, right? And the idea being, why would you get in a fight with a newspaper or somebody who's going to just drown you out in noise? If, you don't have, and this is, of course, this is pre-internet thinking, right? Where it actually did cost money to say things. And it used to be a limitation. This was where a lot of the power of newspapers came from, that ink by the barrel power, right? To be able to get an idea out there. And this was a lot of taken away to a certain degree, right, by the television networks. But there was still a power of the printed word, right? As people read information, I think it interacts with you a little bit differently than just having someone tell you stuff. And it was when we really moved now to, because we had newspapers are dead, and now the people read all the time, but they read in a place where you don't have to buy ink, right? So there's not even that question or notion of having to invest in responding. You can just drown out nearly anything with mounds of bullshit. What kind of job training do you think will prepare us for this reality? There is on the chart that I talked about, accountants and auditors are good, and I mean a lot of the people who are doing the automation, which is kind of what I do, software people and stuff like that, I mean generally is okay. It's actually an interesting chart. I mean the idea is I think to try and focus on, and I think again it's the same kind of thing, to try and look for those kind of jobs that aren't going to be that affected by it, and even those people who are, have to work for the training of jobs that aren't. The difficult part in that is as you have like masses of people, who don't have useful job skills moving into the future, that's what's going to be a really difficult part. And there is going to be lots of job training that's going to happen. I mean, a lot of these big ones are like cook, restaurant, hostess, and these are big dots on here. 3 million employed, 400,000 employed. I linked this the other day. Is your job about to disappear, I think is the name of it. But it's got a nice interactive graph. But, I mean, there is. And that's the thing. There has to be this massive investment for continuing education and job training. And Obama was aware of this and worked towards it, put towards a lot of money to it. I don't know if we're going to see that same kind of investment and awareness coming out of the current administration and the Republicans, and especially with, and this what ties into that Medicare quote and Medicaid, like, well, you want just go get a job that pays for it, and then like, well, wait, I need training. Well, go get some training. Well, I don't have any money. I don't have the time. I don't have what's going on. That's what I just. That's unfortunately that's really that's the alternative, and that's the dystopian place. And this we're gonna get to that a little bit more later in the show. But that's the dystopia I'm trying to avoid. So we'll go real quick on this. I've been ranting and raving. I don't want to go on forever and ever tonight. But Bothsidism. Actually, sorry. I wanted to finish up with this. The ink by the barrel. We've had this problem now where there's no way to call bullshit on somebody who doesn't talk to and interact with the people who do that, which is our media system. There's been, I think, I saw a story about this, like 12 interviews so far that the president has given. 6 of them were with Fox News, which are friendly, like Fox and Friends interviews. There was one with CBS, one with NBC, one with ABC, none with CNN, and then one with like the Christian Broadcasting Network and Breitbart. And it's the constant stream of the bullshit, right? So like even like say like having to try and get a straight answer out of the press secretary is impossible. They've made them turn off the cameras for a number of the press briefings this week because they're just sick of this video showing them to be completely incompetent and contradicting themselves constantly. And so it just makes it a really, really difficult situation to just deal with people who are lying all the time and then can cover it up. Because recall, I was talking about some of the automation and the bots, but another place that has cost a great many jobs is in the news industry and in the newspaper world, where there are the computers act as so many, and like I was talking about, that entire distribution network for, say, retail that exists now, the entire distribution network being automated by computers exists for news. Where it has already, and that's what newspapers are competing against, is this completely robot-infused situation. That's their competition. And some of these people just with a nice letterhead, a new name, and now just start spouting whatever. Sell ads. I mean, that's the business, so they can do it. And you've seen how powerful and how difficult that is to stop. I see the PolitiFact all the time popping up with, another complete bullshit news story took off. And now it happens all the time. That is something that you just have to keep finding. It's difficult. We've talked about this before. I have, for sure. But I certainly think it's important to support monetarily good media and good investigative journalism and give them the power to stand up as independent. And I do think there's a role for government funding for media. But again, you think about that when there has a certain administration, and then you're like, why? Wait, we're going to pay for Breitbart? And I was like, no. I do like funding for NPR. So, and then this is where you get into this both sides. And this is actually a good tangent, because I kind of talk about that idea, right? Well, I'd love to have this good, government funding for, BBC quality, hands-off journalism, and then you have somebody like Trump in charge, and it's like, well, all right, Breitbart, here's a bunch of money, be good, or, when the Bush administration, you had a bunch of funding going to, these abstinence-only education and very skirting that line of endorsing religion from a government perspective. And I don't think that both sides do that. And that saying, again, someone on the left, what I want is this independent. I want, a certain amount of money being like, all right, I want you guys to produce this. Here's some funding. I didn't think about this too far, so I'm not going to give you a completely precise plan for what I think is correct. But I don't mind the system that we have now. And I would like to see a more robust public media system. But both-sidism is going to be really hard. Speaking of which, there was another FBI director fired, and he was fired for gross misconduct. There was a new nominee ready the next day to continue leading the FBI. The only other time the FBI director has been fired, it was after, the Twitter thing and intimidation stuff and fake tapes, and there has not been a new FBI director nominated. And this was what kind of came out this week. There is a formal process one goes through to nominate a replacement, and that they haven't done it. And so there becomes a question, and they're like, well, we're just vetting stuff and vetting. And, well, why? Wait. So again, if you're competent here, you need to be vetting before you fire to provide this continuation, right, of government services. And so it's just utter incompetence that this continues to go on. So there is no FBI nomination that has happened. And again, trying to get a clear answer for why is impossible. Now, speaking of holding them accountable and understanding why, you ask in the press briefing, hey, we've seen stories from California and a couple states where there's crops rotting on the vine, people can't find any workers for, a lot of them picking. A lot of the people who had done this previously were undocumented, but they're really scared by your crackdown. What is your plan? Microphone. Because this is happening too, and getting a clear answer on this kind of stuff, and getting them to understand that this is, the disruption for the economy is going to start hitting people and is hitting people already because of this kind of stuff, and that there are perhaps unintended consequences from, build that wall. It sounds great and gives, racists a hard on, but it doesn't really help solve the problem or really even address it in a rational manner. And so when you don't do that, you create other problems like rotting crops, which you're going to see more stories about to the degree that you believe media is real. Real quick, because I want to go eat some food, because I like food. The Russian cyber attack response, I'm going to have to read a little bit more about this in the big Washington Post story, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about it later. But from what I understand, there was Obama wanted to do a little bit, have a public thing. There's a problem because the Russian attack was so partisan in nature that it was so obvious that they were trying to get Trump elected and so much anti-Hillary stuff. They couldn't get the Republicans to agree to make a public statement before the election. And Mitch McConnell, he wouldn't go and talk to them or say nothing. He said, no, we're not going to tell them. We're not going to tell them together that Russia's trying to hack us. I just don't think that's right. So now his wife is in the administration. She is the Secretary of Transportation, and I'm sure they're doing quite well financially. One of the other things that Obama did as a response was set us up the bomb in their network, so we have a capability of striking back, I guess, to a certain degree. We left the trigger hanging out for the next president to pull, and kind of... Yeah, I'm pretty sure Trump's telling them where it is and how it works. So, or trying to at some point. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Again, that's the story that's still developing. It's such an odd situation, so odd that somebody start doing like this weekly rant show. That like the Russians hacked our election and was complete incompetent as president of the United States. Just like the guy who hacked the election wanted. But anyway. It's odd. It's an odd situation. No doubt about it. The correct response is not to pick up an assault weapon and start shooting government employees. It's not. I can't say that clearly enough. I hope I could say it clearly enough that no one could re-edit my video to make me say the opposite, but I'm sure they could, just because I tend to be a little facetious. But this kind of stuff, it's absolutely horrible. I'm talking about the shooting where the guy went there at the softball practice, opened fire, and for all, the damn left and all that, there's not anybody who agrees with this, and then on the left, there's just not. But I swear to fucking God, I've heard so many gun nuts tell me over the years, well, that's why the Second Amendment exists, protect ourselves from a government. So when we feel government's all tyrannical, we can go and... How do you make that determination, right? Do you have meetings? Because if you have meetings where you have guns and you're talking about overthrowing the government, probably illegal. So you kind of have to, decide it yourself? Or How? When? Because here's the thing that's so bullshit about that. The Second Amendment is about forming militias to defend the government of the United States. And it's not about trying to throw it over with handguns and shit, because that's what it looks like. We saw that. That's literally what it looks like when somebody does that, and that's not what anybody wants. And I guess there may be some fancy, well, if enough people do it all at once, then they call in the fucking Marines, man. That's not why the Second Amendment exists. And there's, unfortunately, and I've said this, and I'll say this a lot, and if you see me comment occasionally, you will see this phrase a lot. The right wing in this country is completely intellectually bankrupt at this point. And this is another aspect of it, where we have this shooting. There were literally armed guards there to stop it. Some of the Republicans said, well, we need more guns on people so we can stop it. You got stopped by guys they were armed police guys. Man, guns, dude. I don't know. Anyway, that's our show for the evening. I appreciate everybody who dropped by and wandered in and gave me a few minutes of your time. I do. I'll keep talking. We'll see if we can figure out the perfect answer to everything. No, I'm just kidding. That's not. Totally not. You should watch my thing on how dystopias happen, because that's how they happen. It's just about looking for better answers, good answers, rational ones based in fact and reality. And that's my idea anyway. So everybody, thanks for wandering by. Said that twice. So if I say it 3 times, I think something jumps out of the window and attacks me. I don't know how Candyman works. Candyman works. How does? Yeah. All right, so everybody have a good night. I'm going to go have some dinner. Peace out. See you next week. Good night.